She's the first Cannabis Ombudsman in Connecticut and the nation. We talk with Erin Gorman Kirk about her first full year in office and her thoughts on Connecticut's cannabis industry. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. A year ago, Erin Gorman Kirk, a Connecticut-based lawyer, was appointed by the state as the very first cannabis ombudsman to advocate and look after the interests of medical marijuana patients in the state. We've spoken to Erin before, when she first started and then again 6 months into her role. And now with a full year under her belt, we're catching up again to see what this outspoken individual has to say about the work she's done over the past year, her relationship with the Department of Consumer Protection, who look after both adult use cannabis and medical marijuana in the state, and her thoughts on the state of the cannabis industry in general here some 2.5 years on since adult use cannabis was legalized for sale in Connecticut, and the effects it's had on the medical marijuana industry and its patients. Erin, thanks for coming back on the podcast. It's been a year now since you started this unique position, not only here in Connecticut, but I believe still in the nation. So give us a sense of what's been happening over the past year.
Ryan, thanks for having me again. I appreciate the opportunity. Can't believe a year has gone by already. It's amazing. You think that you're plodding along and next thing you've got a year. So it's been very exciting. And I think the office has been well received in Connecticut and across the country. Initially, I began with helping out patients and then moved into drafting legislation, which we have been able to pass some really good measures. The patient community, I think, is happy with some of the things that have gotten done. We're looking to the future to see how else we can tweak the framework a little bit.
The legislative session has just ended. So give us a sense of what actually made it through this legislative session.
I think a couple of great measures have been enacted that will help us compete with the nearby states. One of the issues that we've had that you've been really good about reporting is that we've lost a lot of our patients. We probably have halved the original 58, 60,000 down to 30, 35,000 now. And a lot of that is a function of the marketplace. If there's nothing to buy, then you're going to a different state. So in an effort to keep our patients here and to maybe capture travelers, vacationers, concert goers, and others, we have added the ability of reciprocity of medical cards, so that if others are coming through the state, they can shop here. We have a lot of our patients as going from Maine to New Jersey. What we're trying to do is give them a reason to stay in Connecticut. And one of the things we were able to pass in that regard were higher levels of allowable THC in the flower and in some concentrates. And the patients that call me claim that they have been used to higher THC percentage, and that THC percentage is not available in flowers now that the adult users have come on. And so allowing a higher cap will allow for, I believe it will incentivize producers to make the higher THC products, because now they can sell them to everyone. And there's no smaller segment to sell through. Another great thing we got, which is really important for patients because of the retail sort of pressure, is that we've allowed pharmacists to be used by more than one entity. So you can have a pharmacist employed by different stores for different hours, and they can do it via telemedicine. So what's great about that is you don't have to have one person in a store for the entire day, especially if you're a hybrid store and you might not have as many medical patients. So what I like about this remote verification ability of the pharmacist is we've had people have to close their stores for the day if their pharmacist didn't come. So pharmacists will still be dispensing. Everything is still the way it should be, but they don't have to physically be in that store. And I think that brings economies of scale. I think it'll bring prices down. And I think it will make more people turn to what is another great feature of the legislation. 7181 is the bill. And that is the ability of any store to become a hybrid store. One of the reasons I propose that is Massachusetts is allowing that. And that gives a certain verticality to the shops up there. It doesn't necessarily provide verticality here, but it does allow Any retail store can go hybrid now. So that means they're going to service more medical patients, which should bring more products to those patients, according to the producers we've spoken to about this. And it will allow for us to compete with these other states, I think.
Just want to clarify with you, you made the point that THC levels, medical marijuana patients have been used to higher THC levels, and you said that has been increased. Just for clarification, that's for everybody. So it won't just be medical marijuana patients that can buy the higher THC level.
Yes, thanks for the clarification request. I had coined a term called universality, which to me meant you can sell through to the adult and the medical user in one store, rather than going over to the medical side and only being able to get 32% flower. In other states like Illinois, you can get that higher flower, although it's taxed for the non-medical patient. And I said to the state, if you want to do that, fine, but at least make it available to adult users. That's the only way the producers have told me they're going to produce the higher flower, if they have more people to sell it to. Now what you can do is you can buy the higher 30 to 35%, and it has to be displayed in a separate part of the store. So it's not like a medical section. It's just, that's the higher concentrate section. Look at those, and if you want them, then you can get them. But it's not restricted to medical anymore. And that frees up producers to make products that many patients who don't have a medical license want. They want the higher THC.
So I just want to just talk a little bit more about that, because one of the issues has also been, it wasn't just about the fact that there wasn't product available for medical marijuana patients, but there was also there's been this ongoing issue about quality of the cannabis here in Connecticut. Mold and yeast have continually come up. You are also aware that fairly recently Curaleaf actually did a voluntary recall of medical marijuana. So those patients were advised about that. Isn't there a concern that, okay, fine, they'll start growing it, but where's the quality aspects?
There always are concerns about that. Absolutely. In my experience in other states, when a market gets robust, the cream rises to the top, reputations become much more important, and the safety of the end user becomes paramount. I do think that this kind of movement towards understanding, first of all, that even though you're maybe not holding a medical card, you still may be a patient, and allowing adults to choose the products that work best for them will result in better quality. I think there's going to be a lot more people that understand they just can't sell to just nobody. They got to know who they're selling to. And I know that they're doing market research and they're trying to figure out who their customers are. But I believe that my experience in other states shows me that people start really competing to make those really good products, those craft products, whether it's in the medical or adult use space. And I think a lot of us are still holding out hope 3-4 years into the adult use, that the craft folks are still waiting to come online. They're still building out. They're still trying to find real estate. There's all these barriers, but that once some other people get into this market, there will be differences in quality. There'll be differences in strains. There'll be differences in availability and in products. Legislators are approaching me now. They're starting to hear who I am, and they're saying, tell us what the patients want. So I think for the first year, we got a lot of good stuff in 7181. Obviously, we didn't get everything. I know the home growers wanted more. I think things will evolve as more producers and more folks come online. And then there's the question of when the DCP will hold another lottery and in what categories. I'm hoping that they don't have a large 149, but they have smaller licenses to get more growers, because we're still needing inputs.
One of the other things I think that happens in a lot of industries is like secret shopping. Have you actually undertaken any sort of secret shopping at all? Because like we said, going back to the Curaleaf thing, it was fine, but then obviously they had to do a voluntary recall. Have you satisfied yourself through any form of secret shopping that when you've picked up a product from a particular seller, that it's met quality, any retesting? Just give us a sense of that, because that is something that happens in the wider world, just to make sure that things are absolutely okay.
So I have spent 2 weeks' pay after taxes on secret shopping, spent a lot of money. My issue is I can't get it to a lab because I don't have access to the lab here, and I'm not driving it across state lines and doing anything illegal. I am secret shopping, and I do have others in university settings that are secret shopping and doing lab testing for us. I'm not able to do that myself, but I am secret shopping. And when I find products that I feel are problematic, I call the manufacturer, I give them the batch number, and I tell them exactly what the issue is. Then I pick up the phone and call DCP and report to them. And I can put something under a loop and only do so much.
Obviously, we're not asking you to name people clearly, but through that sort of like secret shopping that you've done, did you come across anything that, caused any alarm?
One of the main things I'm finding is that I go to a facility that's growing and I see really good, nice, moist, what they call sticky bud. By the time we get it, maybe 6 months later, it's dry as a bone. There have been a lot of issues with final form testing and the various requirements here. A lot of that's a moving target, as I'm sure you're aware. My issue is, why is it so dry? We don't have sticky bud in the state, and I go to other states and you can still get an end product that's a good, moist product. What I'm finding here is patients call me and tell me the same thing I'm discovering in secret shopping. It's hard to open the packages, whether it's an envelope or a container. It's when you open the package, sometimes it's so dry, it comes out and dissipates. It's on your fingers, it's on your hands, and you've already lost half a gram by the time you even get your 3.5 grams open. And then it's super dry. And I film opening up the package so they see that I'm opening that package. And then I do this and I say, do you hear that? That's good. And then you can see what it's like. I have not put those up on any public platform. I don't want to name and shame at this point because I just got in. That's still a possibility. What I do in that case is I call the manufacturer and say, why is this happening? This stuff is not what I think is a good quality for the price.
Because I appreciate, as you said, you don't want to name and shame them, but what are they saying? Because they're growing this stuff all the time, so they must have a reason as to why it's not quite at the level that, you're expecting.
They claim it's because of all the testing requirements. And without getting into it, because it would take a 20-minute conversation, there have been final form requirements that the community does not appreciate and that have now been put on the back burner so we can find other ways to ensure that our cannabis is safe.
One of the things that also has been mentioned quite heavily here in Connecticut is remediation of product. Does that, to your knowledge, I know that you are a lawyer, you're not a scientific expert, but you do have a lot of expertise. Does remediation, these forms of remediation, can that have an effect on the ultimate quality of a product that is purchased?
I can't imagine that it's not. I had a package recently that was dated that it had been inspected November 25th of 2025, a date which has not happened yet. It failed. 4 days later on 1/31/25, which was the correct date, it passed. I think if I had seen that before I bought it, I wouldn't have bought that product because obviously they remediated it in between. And I know a lot of people say, oh, we remediate our limes and this and that. I'm smoking that. I don't smoke limes. If I, as a patient, had seen that label, I would have chosen something else. And that's a huge bone of contention here because we're saying we have signage that says some products may be remediated. And that's like going to a grocery store and saying some of the milk is pasteurized and some of the milk is raw. Raw milk has its own issues. I want to know which is which. We are not getting down to that level yet. It's still a sign on the store and on the package. And the problem here is until you have the package in your hand, you don't get that label. Theoretically, you could probably figure it out. But when I do a QR code scan, it's bringing me COAs for every single product made from that flower, some of which is in 2024. And I want to see what the 2025 one is. So you're scrolling and you're scrolling. I think the DCP and I need to work more on how to find this information in one place. Some patients have complained that there's 4 different points that you have to go to get all the information just for one product. I've brought that to Commissioner Caffarelli's attention, and I think they'll be working on that. They were trying to get through legislative session. In terms of remediation, I think that a lot of people still won't be satisfied. I did the best I could. I did not win.
Let's pick up on DCP. They are the main organization, the state agency here in the state of Connecticut that looks after medical marijuana as well as obviously adult use. You are not part of DCP. Obviously, you have conversations. 2 things. There's a 2-part question. What's the relationship like with DCP now? Is it getting better? And secondly, I don't know how you want to answer this. They sent a rather chilling effect through the industry earlier this year after a cultivator was giving public testimony during the legislative session. The next day found DCP operatives on their door for an unauthorized inspection, which the commissioner ultimately apologized for. So give us a sense, because people, I think, feel that, yes, of course, there needs to be these state agencies there. But what is the situation with DCP?
DCP and I actually have gotten along a lot better in the last 6 months. I think initially they weren't sure of my role and they were charging forward with their mission. And we have monthly calls, although we can pick up the phone anytime. And I just was on the phone with them before this call about the legislation 7181. We are in regular communication. We talk every month. And what's been great is I'll give them ideas, and initially they're just taking it in. I'll give you a couple of examples. We spoke in April, and I said, we've had some smoke shops here that are really damaging kids. Why don't we do what New York does? Put a QR code like they do in New York City on every legitimately licensed shop in this state. Then people know I'm going into a legitimate dispensary, not some head shop or smoke shop. Another thing I've asked for, because I went to a dispensary and it was a great dispensary, but I thought that it was hybrid and it wasn't. And that's fine, but I want to know which is medical or which is whatever. So they're going to put a green cross on the dispensaries like they do in California and like European pharmacies. I really like that. I proposed that a while ago because I think that shows you there's a legitimate place. And given the restrictions on advertising, that can at least help with some of the confusion. Other things I've asked for are 2-year medical cards. I've asked for reciprocity. I've asked for the higher potencies, and we got all of that. And all of that went through DCP. When I talked to them initially, these were just elements that I proposed, and then we would talk about them. And then a couple months later, they came back and said, wow, we really like the idea of the QR code. If you don't know whether it's a legitimate store, we should have a green cross. And you're right. Why don't we have 2-year cards? And it will probably be better. I know some of the people that are these certifiers will be upset, but for the patient population, particularly elderly people who have trouble with the JPEGs and the downloading, this is the real answer for them. And so I got most of the things that patients asked for. We didn't get insurance coverage, which is happening in other states. That's my next year's goal. We didn't get workman's compensation, but I did not have time to really even work on that. So there are a lot of things I think the office can still do. I get a little bit of grief for being a cheerleader. I didn't make the 8th grade team. So, I've been making up for it ever since, but I am a cheerleader because I believe positivity is the way forward. Yes, we point the flaws out. Yes, we're upset that we didn't get every single thing we asked for legislatively, but I've been doing this 40 years and I've never gotten everything I've asked for legislatively in the first year. I asked for 10 things. I got 6 of them or something. I think that's pretty good for this office and for patients. And I really am very hopeful that we will work together going forward with the new McKinley inside DCP running the new CCC there. And we have a great relationship with DCP now. You referred to the issue with that inspection matter, which is what I said earlier would take us a half an hour to discuss. That was unacceptable. You cannot have someone testify and then have a visit from the government. That's not how this country operates, and that's not how we should operate. And I commend Commissioner Caporelli for immediately getting on that and saying unacceptable. The person was removed from their post and is in a different part of the DCP now. And I think the community had to understand that they were listened to. And again, we still are going to have naysayers who say we didn't get everything, but it's a process, right?
I want to pick up with you as well about the fact that prices still really in this state are higher than other states. We're still seeing a lot of transit across other states where the product is cheaper and there's strains that people can still get. As you said, there's still a lot of work to do. We also saw recently as well The Botanist, which had 3 stores here, and the organization behind it, Acreage Holdings, have opted out of the Connecticut market. They have sold their stores, and those will now be taken over by another company called Budder. What does that sort of say about the market? Because if we're honest about this, and I know it's only 2.5 years since adult use, obviously medical marijuana has been going a lot longer. Connecticut really hasn't hit the figures it wanted to hit at the end of the day. And I think if everyone's honest about that is the truth. What is it saying about the market? Is it just that it's still young? Are we not getting things right still? Just give us a quick idea of your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think that it's what you just said. I was pretty surprised that Botanist, a large corporation like that, pulled out, but we could see it coming about 1.5 years ago. Canopy bought Acreage. There was a lot of upper echelon movement. There was listing and delisting concerns. Air Wellness has also decided to leave the state, which is heartbreaking because they were backing a person who I thought had incredible ideas for servicing the women in this market. I'm crushed about that. They are staying in other states around us. So that tells me that they either feel that we're overregulated or that we just have too many restrictions. One of the things I hear is they can't advertise. Their labels are all generic. They don't feel they can differentiate. And when they bring a product, say from Air Wellness, New Jersey, here, people don't know what AYR is. They'll drive by the Manchester store. They don't know that's a cannabis shop. Air Wellness just doesn't have a name here like others. Now, the Botanist did, but the Botanist, for the last 3 or 4 years that I've been looking at it, has had some terrible management problems. They weren't paying their staff. They wouldn't allow tips. I started a tip jar in Danbury at one point because I found out that workers couldn't afford the gas to get to the shops because they weren't being paid enough. They didn't treat their employees as well as they should have. I think that part of that is a reflection on Canopy and what they've done. But I do think that the problem is we are a small state. We don't have the ability to really show what we've got. We don't have farmers markets. We don't have billboards. It's difficult to get the word out. Now, you do have mailers. You can do a mailing, but you throw those away. I just feel like we need to do more to show that Connecticut has great stuff. And I'm hoping they get up and running, as I said, and make this like a craft brewery situation, a craft cannabis situation.
It's been great talking to you. As we said, it's a year in office. We can't expect absolute miracles, but it sounds like a lot of work has been done between your office and obviously the Department of Consumer Protection. And it'll be interesting to see, hopefully in the next 6 months or a year, maybe how things change again. But in the meantime, Erin Gorman Kirk, Connecticut Cannabis Ombudsman, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to reach me, I'm at erin.kirk@ct.gov. And I thank you for letting people know this office exists. And please reach out for any needs that you may have.
And if you're a medical marijuana patient and have concerns or comments you want Erin to know about, that email again for her is Erin, ERIN.Kirk, KIRK, @ct.gov. And you can also visit her office's website at portal.ct.gov/Cannabis Ombudsman for more details about the state's medical marijuana program. Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. Connecticut's agricultural industry highlighted its resiliency through diversity as it held this year's Northeast Association of State Departments of Agriculture annual meeting in Mystic. Brian Herbert is the commissioner for Connecticut's Department of Agriculture and says the event is an important one on the agricultural calendar.
Great opportunity for the 10 states to get together with the national leadership, talk about things that we're seeing, hearing, experiencing, share potential solutions, commiserate, if it were, on challenges that we haven't found a potential solution for. But as the host state, what I'm really excited about is to showcase Connecticut agriculture. And so we're going to be bringing in partners from across the state that we've worked with and farmers to highlight how diverse and unique we are.
Herbert says the annual meeting allows him to also highlight the state's veteran farmers as well as growing female farmers and the nation's only tribal nation farmers. He also said one of their top agenda items will be how each state's agricultural sector moves forward in light of sweeping changes brought to the industry by the Trump administration.
Now more than ever, the National Association is carrying a lot of water for the independent state departments of agriculture. And what's happening with the Farm Bill? What does the big, beautiful budget bill mean for USDA? How are we going to work through the staffing challenges at FSA, NRCS, rural development county offices? In the end, a farmer isn't necessarily thinking about who does what. They're thinking about the challenges they have and how to overcome those challenges.
The 10 states that attended the meeting included all the New England states, as well as New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. The agricultural industry here in Connecticut contributes approximately $4 billion to the state's economy each year, has over 5,000 farms, and supports more than 30,000 jobs. Connecticut's Comptroller Sean Scanlon visited the town of Thompson in the Northeast recently to speak with local businesses and municipal leaders. During a Q&A session, Scanlon said although he feels the state is out of its historic fiscal crisis, there's another crisis now that's just as bad.
And that's the crisis of affordability, which it's too expensive to get health care, housing, child care, pay your Eversource bill, right? All these things are crippling not just people, but businesses. And I think it's our job and incumbent upon us as a state to transition away from just focusing on solving that fiscal crisis to doing both these things at the same time.
Scanlon said he believed the new budget recently passed in the state will look to achieve some of these issues, but conceded there was a long road ahead due to what might happen if the president's big, beautiful bill gets voted on by the Senate on July 4th. During that same Q&A session, Scanlon was asked about his political future and said it wouldn't be in Washington, but closer to home.
I love state government. I love the job that I have. The governor, I think, is leaning towards running again for another term, and I think he's doing a really good job. If he decided not to run, it is a job that I'm interested in, and probably the only job that I'm interested in beside the one that I have. But that would take a lot of conversation with my wife.
Scanlon said he has no interest in a job in Washington where people just shout at one another, but believes at a state level, Democrats and Republicans can still work together to bring about positive change. The event was organized by the Northeastern Connecticut Chamber of Commerce. As the weather continues to warm up, air quality in Connecticut and surrounding states could suffer through pollution that elevates ozone levels, along with smoke drifting down from the Canadian wildfires. Tracy Babbage is the chief of the Connecticut Bureau of Air Management and says using 14 real-time air monitoring stations across the state, they produce data that can be helpful to people who may have breathing sensitivities to air pollution.
One way we do that is we use what's called an air quality index. And the air quality index is really helpful because we're using colors to kind of describe what these levels mean from a public health perspective. So, for example, if the air quality is forecasted as green or good, it means that the air is healthy and clean to breathe.
Babbage says due to the geographical position of Connecticut, much of the poor air quality is due to pollution from other eastern seaboard states being driven up by southwesterly winds.
So we are directly impacted by air quality that comes from outside of our borders. So we are directly impacted from air quality from the southwest. It's almost like we're at the end of the pipeline of emissions that come up the eastern seaboard. From that perspective, Connecticut experiences some of the worst air quality as a result of what we refer to as air pollution transport.
Babbage says temperature increases and pollutants in the air react with sunlight, creating the ozone and smog, which can be harmful to health. If you suffer from asthma or other breathing sensitivities, you can check the daily air quality in your area by visiting airnow.gov for an air quality forecast. And even though the state may have approved its biennial budget, many towns and cities across the state are struggling with theirs. In Norwich recently, with just hours to go before a midnight deadline, the city council told city manager John Salamone he had an hour to find another $6 million in cuts. Salamone is reported in the Day newspaper as saying he's never seen anything like it in his 45 years of public service. The council eventually agreed the $154.4 million budget, unable to agree on any major cuts with just 7 minutes before the midnight deadline. And the town of Plainfield has had its budget rejected twice now by public vote, with all three questions on the ballot failing to pass. Those were the town's operating budget, the education budget, and the town's capital improvement plan. Residents of Plainfield will have another chance to vote on the budget on June 16th after the town revises all three aspects of their budget. The budget situation in Plainfield has also affected the local police department, who have had to find over $300,000 in cuts already, and prompted the police chief to issue a social media video asking residents to consider carefully the town's budget when voting again on June 16th. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.